Hello, dear friends and colleagues. Sometimes us interpreters do or say things that we end up regretting because they eventually impact our practice, impact our profession in not very positive ways. Something like that has happened lately, and it made me reflect on the fact that many times interpreters say things or write things without really knowing what they are doing because they don't check for the truthfulness of the statements that they are just repeating, and they end up sometimes committing embarrassing situations, and in some other occasions, just really hurting their clients or hurting themselves. The main thing that we have to always understand is the golden rule that don't always believe everything you hear. You gotta check, you gotta verify before you make somebody else's statement your own, because sometimes they are right, but oftentimes they are not. And it's enough for one of them to be wrong for you to really hurt yourself professionally. For example, social media is a big problem that contributes to these situations. Just recently, in the past few days, there was an incident at the Oval Office in the United States where President Trump, Vice President Vance, and President of Ukraine, Zelensky, got into an exchange, a very heated exchange that was concerning, that was puzzling, but it was what it was. It was maybe a political maneuvering. Maybe the people's feelings got hurt. Maybe the emotions just heated up way too much. And the result was what everybody knows. Now, this is not a political post, and I'm not going to attribute guilt to any of the parties at all. This is more about what I saw and made me a little bit uncomfortable in a few minutes after this happened, and for days and days to come online on social media. A lot of interpreters, most of them whose names I don't recognize, or interpreters that really probably have not experience working in diplomatic interpreting, started saying that this could have been averted, that this could have been avoided had there been interpreters working during that press conference. But because there was none, and because President Zelensky's first language is not English, therefore he misunderstood certain things, he was not able to express others, and then this just snowballed to what we all saw. It is true that when you don't speak a language with fluency, or when you really want to cover all the details in a certain field, it is the best option to always have an interpreter working with you. However, it is true that interpreters are problem solvers of everything, and it's clear that in this situation an interpreter would have never helped. This was, first of all, not a negotiation. This was a press conference that turned in a certain way into a negotiation. In negotiations, there are always interpreters, but this was not it. This was a press conference where the parties have held some others in the past, always in English, because press conferences are conducted on a very different rhythm and on a very different level. In this case, the problems are much deeper than anything that an interpreter could have fixed. So for people to go out there and say, oh, the problem is that there were no interpreters, this could have been really avoided if had there been a conference interpreters there working on consecutive manner, is not true. This had nothing to do with it. The people talking are people that really do not know what is the policy of either country regarding interpreters for diplomatic settings. These are most of the people that were saying this are people that are just so focused on interpreting, just so full of themselves that they think that interpreting can solve every single problem, and that it's not true. In this case, interpreting was not the guilty party. Interpreting would have helped with absolutely nothing here. People won't stop screaming and shouting so that the interpreter can interpret. That would never happen. So please, let's avoid making this kind of comments, and especially, and the main concern to me, because people can say whatever they want and everybody's entitled to their opinion. But what we should never do is start just taking this as the truth and start just repeating it and parroting what the original person said and just keep posting and reposting, making it ourselves or making it our own, because that's just going to come back to haunt you. The second example that I wanted to put is that there's been, in the past few months, many people also on social media talking about the requirements for an immigration proceeding in the United States when documents are written in a language other than English. And a lot of people have been saying that the translations should be translations translated by ATA certified translators. Well, I am not saying that a certified translator is not a good option. I am not saying that maybe even ATA certified translations are a good option, although I must clarify that ATA does not test people on this type of legal translation. And therefore, being certified by ATA is just like being certified as a court interpreter in the United States, which is only covering the criminal field and doesn't mean anything when you have or you face an interpretation on civil matters, for example. But the fact here is that the law does not require that. The law is very specific, and to be around telling people you need an ATA certified translator or your translation has to be certified, it's false. That is not true. The legislation is very clear, and this has been the law of the land for over 30 years. As many of you know, the Title 8 of the Code of Federal Regulations is the one that regulates everything that has to do with immigration proceedings. We call it 8 CFR. And 8 CFR tells us concretely on section 1003.33 how the translations have to be. And here I am going to directly read so that I don't make any mistakes. And this is what the regulations say. Any foreign language document offered by a party in a proceeding shall be accompanied by an English language translation and a certification signed by the translator that must be printed legibly or typed. Such certification must include a statement that the translator is competent to translate the document and that the translation is true and accurate to the best of the translator's ability. And that's the end of the section. So we can clearly say here that there's no requirement to have a certified translator, much less an ATA certified translator, that there is no need for this translation to be certified. All you need to do is to get a document translated from a foreign language into English by a person that is fluent in both languages and asserts so in an affidavit, signs that affidavit, and says that the translation is correct, true, full, and it was performed to the best of that person's ability. End of story. So please, let's not go around telling our clients that the translation has to be a certified translation so that they accept it at immigration, because that is false. Sometimes, like I said, it might be a great translation, and it might be better have the translation done by a professional, don't get me wrong. But we should be careful and not be just expounding these falsehoods, saying that it has to be a certified translation. That is not true. And this is important because we got to remember that in the past we have gone through situations like this where people have been saying certain things that then didn't turn out to be true just because they are repeating what they have read or seen in social media. A few years ago, during the pandemic, with the arrival of distance interpreting or remote simultaneous interpreting, you remember that there were all these platforms that came out, and the platforms were flooding all social media, and they were repeating over and over again that they were needed for this remote simultaneous interpreting, because that was the way to go, because of accuracy, because of sound quality, because of the variety of languages that could be taken care of simultaneously in the same event, and so on. We also remember that these platforms were expensive, and it required a setting and training and all that many times clients were not willing to do, and interpreters were not willing to invest the time or the money in doing. And what happened at the end of the day? Well, the same thing that happened to Betamax VCRs. Zoom came along and some other similar platforms to Zoom, like Microsoft Teams, for example, and others. And they are the ones that are being used now. An overwhelming majority of interpreters uses these other platforms that are very user-friendly, they are very inexpensive, and they offer you everything that you need to do and to have to provide a quality service. You can have multiple channels interpreted simultaneously. You can have security features if you purchase the service from Zoom. So in reality, those that were saying that you needed these other specialized platforms turn out to be wrong. And of course, the platforms are going to dispute this up until today. But the fact and the reality of what the market shows at all levels, including international organizations, government agencies, and private sector, is that people are going with Zoom and similar platforms. So let's make sure that we don't end up the same way by repeating things like certified translators for immigration, or that the Zelensky Trump incident could have been avoided with the participation of consecutive interpreting services. Those things are not true. And the only thing that happens is that they create a terrible disservice to you, because you come across as somebody that is obsessed with interpreting, that thinks that interpreting is the center of the universe, that everything revolves around interpreting. And we all know that that is not true. And then you just come across like a fanatic, and that discourages clients, potential clients, the public at large, and then you don't look good. So please, let's stop this practice and stop hurting ourselves, hurting our clients, and also truly hurting the profession. So please, it's important for all of us to always keep in mind that we should not believe everything we see, or everything we hear, or everything we read. At least that is my opinion. Thank you very much.